Grüß, willkommen in einem anderen aufregendes video. Welcome to yet another exciting video, in this case episode 2 of my figure gaming video series. In this video I'll provide an overview of storage systems for figures, in this case specifically Napoleonics and or ancient 15mm figures. The same principles can be used for other types and sizes of figures. I have previously covered how to make storage boxes, in that case specifically for World War II or Cold War 6mm figures. That video goes into how to make the storage boxes in more detail, but I will cover it briefly here as well, using experiences I have gained since creating my previous video. Over the years I've used this system. I use 4 sizes of storage boxes: A4 standard, A4 deep, A3 and a strange middle size, which I'll not cover in this video to any great extent because you can only get these boxes in certain locations in Europe, so not very useful for other people. A3 document boxes allow you to store a lot of figures, but they are surprisingly hard to transport. I use A3 boxes to store figures I do not use very much. So if you have a large number of seldom used figures, it may be a solution for you. However, the most useful size are A4 boxes, specifically the double deep A4 boxes. These are small, easy to transport and carry enough for a game. One piece of advice I wish to provide here is that when you decide to have a game, pre-pack the figures you intend to use for the game. This allows you to set up a game much quicker rather than sorting through several boxes and trays for the figures you may need. This is the main reason why a A4 box is ideal. However, as well, you will soon discover you may still need more than one standard size A4 boxes for your force mix. This is mainly due to the height of the figures. The solution to this is to use a double height A4 boxes. This allows you to store the entire force mix in a single storage box, irrespective of the height of the figures. In order to make this storage solution, in simple terms, you'll be making a wooden box to place, or wooden trays to place inside your A4 document box. The base of this wooden box will be MDF and the sides will be generally 0.8mm thick pine or oak pre-cut timber. Unless you are a master craftsman, my advice is to always allow for significant margin of error when making these trays. Just a note, gift boxes, often found in newsagency, can also be suitable storage boxes. This is one of my storage building diagrams. The external length is 31.7 centimeters, but the internal size of the wooden box that you're building is 31 centimeters. A similar margin of error applies to the width. I've never found any issues with these measurements, but if you're a master craftsman, you can try and increase the size of the tray so it fits snugly into the box. But don't make it fit too snugly because you'll have to remove the trays. Once you've got over the actual size of the tray, the next point to cover is the height of the trays and how many trays you can fit into a box. I use 2 configurations. Well, I use lots of different configurations. For a single box, that is width, a single tray, which is a full 7 centimeters height, and a 2-tray solution with one tray 3.5 and the other 4 centimeters high. One note about height: each tray base is 3mm thick, that's the MDF base, and the felt I place on top of the box is a further 2mm thick. Thus the wooden sides are respectively 6.5 centimeters for the single tray solution and 3 centimeters and 3.5 for the 2-tray solution. The 2-tray solution fits snugly right to the top of the lip of the box, perhaps with a 2mm gap, but that's not really an issue. This is the configuration if you're using a single height A4 box. If you do go down this path, the 6.5 centimeter high single box tray can fit almost any height figures. I normally use these for ancients such as elephants and pike, but I do find myself using them for cavalry, especially if the cavalry have flags, swords in the air and tall hats. You can see in this case there is a small lip. You can find wood which is 7 centimeters high, then you would not have the lip and the box would fit snugly into the A4 tray. But I've been unable to find pieces of timber that height, and quite frankly I don't really need it. I also place moisture absorbent material in the box. You'll soon, as you can see in the right of this image, I had a previous bad experience where some of my figures dissolved, which I think was to do with moisture. So these days I'm quite fanatical about making sure moisture does not get into these boxes. As anyone who's collected figures, the more modern 15mm figures are closer to 18mm, so the height is required for modern high quality figures. An A4 box can easily accommodate up to 36 elements of cavalry, which uses a base size of 4cm wide and 3cm deep. This is large enough for a game of DBN, but for most rules you need at least 50 elements. If the infantry uses 2cm deep bases, you could store 10 elements in each slot. Thus, you could have 30 infantry elements, and this would occupy 3 slots, leaving you enough room for 18 cavalry and or artillery. This may just accommodate a force mix for most other rules, but it's really tight. In order to overcome this issue, I used a rather unusual size box, which I'm not going to cover to any great detail. In this case, I have 3 and 3.5cm trays in these boxes, but unfortunately, because the box is a rather unusual size and I can't buy them anymore, I've decided to go away from this. But nonetheless, if you do find this box, which is a box that is slightly larger than A4 but not A3, it may be a solution for some of your armies. In this case, I placed 2 trays in each of these single boxes. I find the 3cm height trays can accommodate most infantry and artillery, with a 3.5cm tray being reserved for cavalry and troops with flags. If a figure is too high, it can be placed on its side as long as the base depth is no more than 3cm. This does work for Napoleonics, but I find for ancients, a lot more of the cavalry have a lot more tall, pointy things, and I find real difficulty storing that. The sides of the tray use timber which is 0.8mm thick. I used to use 1.2mm thick for my boxes in the past, but I discovered there was no point. It just added weight and there was no benefit, so now I go to 0.8 and it allows me to store more stuff. Inside each box are placed 3mm MDF dividers, which are normally 1cm lower than the box sides, depending on the height of the box sides. If they're too low, you cannot grab anything in the box to pull the tray out. If they're too high, it can be difficult to get figures out, especially if your box is 6.5cm high. After building many boxes, I've arrived at the following basic formula. If the bases, that's the elements that you're putting in the box, are 4cm wide, then measure 5cm along the side piece of the tray. This represents the outer edge of the divider, the 3mm divider. Measure back 3mm, and that's what you need to saw out to allow the dividers to fit snugly. It'll also allow you to very easily fit the elements in once you put felt into the box. If you want a more detailed overview of the process, please view my earlier video. You may ask yourself, why should I create a slot 7mm wider than the bases? The answer is felt is normally 2mm thick, so it'll occupy 4mm of the slot, and the rest is margin of error. When you put your dividers in, you're always going to get a little bit out. If you're a master craftsman, you can reduce this gap by 3mm, and I've made some boxes like this, but I've also made a lot of errors making these boxes useless for me, so I tend to go for the safe option. As indicated, always allow for margin of error unless you are a master hardware craftsman. If your bases are 3cm wide, this shows a possible configuration. As you can see, you can store more figures, but surprisingly, not much more. However, if I was to go down the path of 3cm wide bases for my 10mm or 6mm figures, these boxes in a true tray configuration would be reasonably good. With our one tray solution per A4 standard box, we can store 48 elements, but more practically 40. This is short of the optimal 50 elements per side for most rules, but if your force mix is high quality, then probably this is more than adequate. The advantage is figure height is never an issue with these boxes. With our two tray solution, we can store up to 96 elements, but more practically 80. This is more than enough for a Napoleonics or ancient game. However, some figure heights may pose a problem. Elephants are a major issue. The elephant in the room. The conclusion is you'll often end up bringing two boxes along. This will cover all your height and storage issues comfortably. My rather odd shape box, which are slightly larger, are more than adequate, except in some cases for some extreme height elements for ancients, but it's difficult to find those size boxes. However, gift boxes may give you an alternative in that particular case. If we went down the A3 path, the optimal configuration is 2 tray, one 4 cm high and the other 5 cm high. This can store a lot of figures, 15 elements of infantry or 10 elements of cavalry in each slot. This allows you to store 60 infantry elements and 40 cavalry elements per tray, and the same in the other tray. An impressive 200 elements can be accommodated, and while the height will require you to place some of the elements on the side, like elephants with pikes, all heights can generally be accommodated. This shows one of my A3 boxes, and while an attractive solution, I find this box simply too difficult to transport. If I possessed a 25mm force mix and used the single tray, then it may be suitable, but for 15mm, once I've rammed all my figures in, it ends up being too heavy and contains far too many figures than I need for a game, making a game a bit more difficult setting up than it really should be, and more importantly, making it hard to transport this around. Remember, if I'm providing the force mixes for both sides, I may end up being forced to provide 2 A3 boxes, and that's a lot of weight to carry around. The final solution, as described in my last video, is that I now exclusively use double height A4 boxes. This shows the box I use for Napoleonics and Ancients. The top tray is my deepest tray, which contains all the figures which require height. In this case, this is my early Roman Imperial force mix. The second tray is not as deep, but can accommodate high infantry and not so high cavalry figures. The third tray is the shallowest tray, and can only accommodate infantry and artillery. This shows my basic framework for the trays for Napoleonic and ancient figures. The bottom tray is 4 cm deep, with the actual figure clearance being 3.5 cm. This fits most 15mm infantry, artillery and foot skirmishers. The centre tray is 4.5 cm deep, with the figure clearance being 4 cm. This holds all other infantry and most 15mm cavalry. The top tray is where you place the unusually high figures, cavalry with lances, elephants, and so on. The tray here is 6 cm high and allows for the figure clearance of 5.5 cm. When making this last tray, you will find hardware stores normally don't provide 8mm thick wood, which is 5.5 cm high. You will likely need to purchase 6 cm wide timber and cut it down to 5.5. I initially thought this was going to be difficult, but it ended up being fairly simple. This shows the top-down box layout. In this case, it's designed for 4 cm wide elements. I normally place 2 elements next to each other. If you're going to transport this in luggage, you may need to place packing around your figures to prevent them from flying around. You could also make the slots only fit one element, but I found this arrangement works well enough, and it avoids one problem I have with very deep trays, and that is trying to get your fingers down to get your figures out. If your elements use US Napoleonic basing, which is 2 cm wide, you simply place 4 of them together. The cavalry may be an issue, as this will be 3 cm wide, but you can arrange cavalry and infantry in such a manner to fit everything together if required. The other alternative is to use 6.7 cm wide slots, which fit 2 3 cm wide elements if you're going down the US basing system path. If storing 10mm figures, the trays will not be as high, and there will be more trays accordingly. Now for a quick run through of how to make these boxes. The base is made of 3mm MDF board. I normally use a jigsaw to cut the MDF due to the large size of the board you start with, but it's possible to use a handsaw if you don't have a jigsaw. The sides of the boxes are 8mm thick pine or oak. Go for pine, it's easier to cut. Most hardware stores provide different ranges of sizes. In this case, I'm using 6.5 cm wide boards or timber. They come in 1.2 metre or 2.4 metre sizes. 1.2 metre allows you to make a single box. The wood is cut with a handsaw, fine teeth. I also use a handsaw to cut the grooves, which you can see drawn here. You only need to cut a line 2 to 3 mil thick, then move it to one side and cut another 2 to 3 mil thick line with your handsaw. You can then use the saw to clear out the wood in between. A thin file can assist in smoothing out the slots. When gluing the box together, I use hardware outdoor quality PVC glue. I suppose hobby glue will work, but this glue is thick, takes a while to dry, and gives you a good bond immediately. This shows the baseboard with the glue around it. Place each piece of wood on the baseboard and press until you get a reasonable bond. Then place the next piece until the box is formed. The next part is the tricky part. Place this arrangement on a book very carefully because, of course, the glue hasn't dried, and make sure the book is covered with something that the PVC doesn't stick to, such as contact plastic. PVA or PVC does not stick to plastic. Then place a book on top of it and then align all the wood sides until they are all centered and flush with each other. I normally do one side, spin the arrangement around and line up the other side and repeat the process until I'm happy with it. Once this arrangement is dry, the dividers that I slot into it are normally 3mm MDF cut with a handsaw. Make sure they fit in the slot, but make sure they're tight but not too tight. If too tight, the dividers may bend, so avoid that. If they're too loose, the dividers will move left and right and you may get an uneven slot size. Glue into the slot and press down with some books for 12 to 24 hours. Not heavy books, just a light book, otherwise the dividers may sort of fall over a bit and you end up with an uneven slot side. I also fill in the gaps at the top, as you can see here, with wood putty. The main objective is to ensure the dividers do not slide out of the slots when you lift the box. Using the dividers, the wood putty helps, but quite frankly is not really necessary. PVA, PVC glue normally glues it quite adequately. When painting, I typically use 2 coats. This shows the undercoat. Once you've done your 2 coats, I now glue the felt using hobby glue into the box. This is not really necessary. You could just use the raw timber if you do a good paint job. Maybe you can get away with it. But I actually prefer using felt. It looks good, protects your valuable figures, and the felt grabs the base so the figures don't fly around the box if being transported. I also place felt on the sides using the overrun you see at the top of this image. The result is a felt covered storage box which can keep your figures safe and dry while being in a cardboard box which allows you to store them in your home. Just a quick note, when you're drying this arrangement, really make sure the glue is really dry before you start putting figures into the box. And so we come to the end of my episode 2 video series on figure gaming, in this case storing your 15mm ancient or Napoleonic figures into document storage boxes. Alle guten Dingen, kommen zu einem Ende.